Hi, Presidents. My name is Hansu, and this is the reconstruction of the American public school system. I developed an outline to help us navigate through this whole entire process, starting with the section title and its summary. In section 1 is Introduction, and I'll be introducing the Every Student Succeeds Act and my motives to deal with it. In section 2 is the justification of reforming the act due to it being implemented before COVID, inconsistencies, and skewed priorities. In section 3, I'll be discussing the changes in policy that will increase transparency and create variety in testing. In section 4, I'll be discussing the implementation process for the U.S. Department of Education and states, departments, and or agencies such as the Texas Educational Agency. Section 1, Introduction. What is the ESSA? The Every Student Succeeds Act is the main education law in the United States, as it replaced the No Child Left Behind in 2015. The objective is to ensure an equal opportunity for students across the nation, and it places an emphasis on students in impoverished regions of the states that don't have equal means of education compared to other students in other regions. It also implemented statewide assessments such as standardized testing across states, increased investments to include pre-K funding, and it gave more power to the states. And my proposed change is to completely reform the act. Through Section 2 Justification. Simply, right now, schools are failing students. Since the act was implemented before COVID, we could not see the effects that COVID had on students. On the graph on the right, we can see the distance above or below pre-COVID average gains. And we can see that after COVID, grades 4th through 8th showed a significant decrease in levels of reading and math compared to before COVID. And this is due to the online learning and students simply not learning during those years. And right now, students are a year behind. Most students are a year behind, and we're continuing to let them advance throughout the grades, and we're simply failing them. The act also places too much emphasis on testing, as testing is an unreliable measurement of seeing how smart or how talented an individual is, as it doesn't take account of confounding variables such as test anxiety and the inability to focus during a test. And it shifts the focus for teachers to teach students how to take a test instead of actually learning the content. As in right now, it's more important to make an A in the subject than eventually learn the content. And this is due to the patchwork system. As we can see on the graph on the right, that mathematics, reading, and science all showed a lower average score in our percentiles than the prior year. And this is simply not okay, as in American students are regressing each year, and it seems to be normalized. And this is due to the patchwork system again, due to each state having different system, and it showcased inconsistencies across the nation, as each state has a different motive and goal for every student, and eventually doesn't mesh well together. The act also increased closure of schools. For example, in Chicago, 90% of the schools that closed were a majority African American, and 60% of them had a large proportion of special needs students. And this is simply ironic, as this act was supposed to target those students and made it so they had an equal means of education, but instead we're leaving them in the wind and hanging them out to dry. As we can see on the graph on the right, the historical college enrollment is decreasing every year since the year 2010, and that's simply because students now just most students don't find a reason to pursue further education, as in they think that education in high school is enough for them, but simply in most cases is not. In section 3, hopefully I can provide changes in policy that can improve on those policies. For one, higher investment. We have to target the root of the problem. If the root of the problem is not solved, then the whole entire educational plan will not work. And this is showcased through the standard of living. As we can see that the school performance and percent of students on supported lunch has a direct correlation, as the higher percent of students on supported lunch, usually show a lower percentage of school performance compared to the ones that don't need as much. And the second investment we need to do is teachers. The decline in average teacher pay is shown on the left and is adjusted for inflation, and teachers are actually making less as they did before. And especially the high costs of college now, many individuals do not want to go to college for at least 4 years and become a teacher, accumulate debt, and then have a wage that they can barely afford. And most teachers now work during the summer or have a side hustle to help provide means for their families. And they have to purchase their own supplies for schools, for their students. My second recommendation is to increase variety in testing, and that's through more projects, more presentations, more portfolios, aka the big 3P. And we can see on the graph on the left that formative ongoing assessment, class participation, performance on on-class assignments have the highest absolutely essential grading for students. And this is important because if students want to learn, they will learn. Most of the time, if students do not want to learn a certain subject, they will not give interest, they will not retain the information as they don't care about it, simply. And if it's less standardized testing, I believe that we should still keep standardized testing, but just less of it. And more of these projects, presentations, portfolios, students are able to grasp their information and output it in ways that instead of a pen and paper, and they can visualize their learning experience. And my third recommendation is to establish a nationwide basis. And this creates a backbone for every state to rest on, and it increases in consistency and transparency as now states have to follow. Well, right now states are following similar guidelines, but they're not as strict. So many states are able to hide behind the rules and hide behind information that simply is not okay, as it's just decreasing the experience for students to learn. And the recommendations, these three, the benefits it will bring is that the more teachers, the more educated people are able to teach these students in need. As in, instead of a coach teaching calculus, you can have a teacher that majored in education and math that's able to perform a more efficient, more effective way of teaching towards these students instead of just regurgitating information. My fourth is implementation. Overview. I believe that 25% of this process should be accommodated by the U.S. Department of Education, and that's through establishing a nationwide basis for these states to follow. That includes making the guidelines, providing goals for these states to reach, and simply a basis that every state should follow. And then 75% of it should rely on the states, as the states can delegate some of their power to local regions, as they can focus on each individual student more effectively than a whole entire department for the whole entire nation. And simply to convince these departments and agencies, we can discuss how the U.S. for the first time ever is following education. And for the first time ever, it's ranked 10th globally, which is the lowest it's ever been. As we can see on the chart on the left, U.S. students lag behind international peers, with U.S. at 24 in reading, 36 in math, and 28 in science. And this is due to every state receiving a grade by an educational agency, and only 2 states in the United States receive a B, with 0 receiving an A. And this is simply not okay, as Americans have gone used to average schooling. And this should not be the case, as in back then in the day, the U.S. was so keen on education when we were trying to reach the moon, when we were competing with Russia. But ever since we reached the moon first, we seem to grow complacent with our education. And it's shown how far U.S. students are behind other countries, and simply that's not okay. Also, this leads to a loss of jobs domestically, as in these students internationally are usually have a higher education means, are usually more established, higher prepared for these jobs compared to our students nationally. And simply, we're just out competed. And these students are our future, no matter what. As we progress our nation, we need these students to be educated, to make informed decisions, be able to make decisions on their own, and able to perform the necessities to improve this country as we move forward. And as we move forward and we stick to mediocrity, we're going to continue to fall behind, and eventually we're going to be irrelevant. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now. Thank you.